deposits, you're looking at an average grade closer to 17 grams. So it's a historic fact that this is a high-grade camp. And thus far, our exploration at Hercules on the Golden Mile and the other veins suggests that those vein systems are behaving similar to the ones that were mined in the past. Narrow, very high grade. Geologic map of the greenstone belt. Each block here is 10 kilometers on an edge, so you can see that this view is approximately 100 kilometers in a west to east direction. The various colors there represent different rock units in the district. The gray colors are what we call metasedimentary rocks. The green colors are metavolcanic rocks. When those rocks are metamorphosed, they become green in color, and hence the name greenstone belt. These red colors here are intrusive rocks, granites that are the same age as the enclosing volcanic rocks. We refer to those as syn volcanic intrusions. And you can see by the outline here, that was the original Hercules project in 2006, about 10 square kilometers. Obviously, that's grown extensively since there. Most of you know that we're up to about 1,400 square kilometers. But it's very important to note that Hercules, the Golden Mile, and the veins next to it are hosted by granitic rocks, not by the volcanic rocks. This was one of the reasons why this occurrence was not previously explored and was basically waiting for Kodiak to come along and take advantage of it. And you can see what I mean here. This road that traverses this portion of the photograph and crosses the Golden Mile vein was built about 8 or 9 years ago to facilitate logging in the area. But before that, there was no access into this part of the district. Looking at the Golden Mile here, you can see its full 2-kilometer extent. Right down here in the corner, that was the original discovery outcrop for the Golden Mile. It was no bigger than maybe 2 of these podiums in size, very small. As I mentioned, in 2006 we were exploring the Hercules project, but the initial area of focus was located to the north, to the right-hand side of the slide, about 1 kilometer to the north, an area we call the WL Gold Zone. We actually drilled that in 2006, had very good results, and had planned a very aggressive campaign going in 2007 to explore it and other vein occurrences within that claim group. We simply had the prospecting team very carefully, very meticulously going from outcrop to outcrop and evaluating the other vein occurrences in the project area to determine which ones we should focus additional exploration on. In August of last year, actually late July, they came to this small outcrop here, and believe it or not, just very simply looking down and said, aha, there's visible gold. This is a pretty dang interesting outcrop. Maybe we should do some stripping. And that they did. They stripped back the vein to the road, across to the other side, and with a backhoe tagging along with them to start following that vein out across the countryside. Eventually, 6 weeks later, ending up at this lake and having exposed a vein over 2 kilometers long. Throughout that 2-kilometer strike length, it averages about 2.5 meters wide. And as those prospectors move along, they keep seeing more and more signs of a strongly mineralized system. Sulfides like pyrite, chalcopyrite, as well as visible gold throughout its strike length. It's at that time we realized we truly had something special at hand, and we began focusing our exploration activity here on the Golden Mile. On the surface, the Golden Mile was covered by this gravel here. This is glacial till. It's about 1 meter or 1.5 meters thick. That was completely obscuring the outcrop. So before they came and did all the stripping, there was nothing to see. It was simply typical Western Ontario countryside, flat, boggy, lots of flies, and covered with dirt. As we went along and stripped back the vein, we began a series of channel samples so we could evaluate the gold content, cutting these channel samples every 20 meters along the outcrop. Our first pass through there identified a zone approximately 400 meters long that had an average grade of over 20 grams per ton and averaged 3.8 meters in width. And this is part of the area that you're looking at here. We call that the Central Golden Mile. The samples look like this material here. Bits of visible gold associated with sulfides and iron oxide. Both of these 2 samples came from the surface. We, of course, began following up on these results with drilling, and the diamond drill results were very similar. You can see the grades here are similar, as well as the occurrence. That gave us a lot of confidence that we were really into it, an important new discovery that the mineralization we're seeing underground in our drill core was the same as we were seeing up here on the surface. Since that time, of course, we've done a great deal of drilling. This is a long section looking at the vein as if you've tilted it up and you're looking straight at it on the side. So essentially you're seeing the vertical dimension as well as the east-west dimension of the vein. This graphic was accurate as of mid-late March, and since that time we've added a great deal of drill holes to it. What this does is illustrate the strength of the gold system and the distribution of gold within the system. It's called a grade thickness plot. And what we simply do is take the grade of a given intercept, multiply it times the thickness, and to come up with a value. What essentially this does is it normalizes every drill hole intercept back to a meter and diminishes the overabundance of gold in certain holes, very high grade in some holes, and lets you get a good idea of what the system looks like, what its morphology is. And further, to make this even easier to understand, we cut back to 100 grams into the high grade samples so we can get a good picture and let this information help guide our exploration. So you can see that what the picture was at this time. We had several open areas that were obvious places to do additional drilling. Now we've gone and basically filled in this diagram, and in fact have drilled what would be down in this portion if we continue the diagram. Note that it's 800 meters across here. The entire Golden Mile itself is about 2,000 meters. We've now finished drilling on a 60-meter spacing the entire distance of the Golden Mile. And just as before, what we are seeing is that nearly every drill hole has gold mineralization associated with it. Yes, sir?
Approximately what's the width of the vein?
The average width is probably still holding right in there, that 2.5 meter range. We have places where the vein is up to 11 meters wide, and obviously, places where it gets down to being only ½ meter wide. What's interesting though, and you can see this on the surface, even when it pinches down to say only ½ meter, it's still carrying very good grade. There's one place in the central Golden Mile on the surface where it pinches down to ½ meter wide and it's still running 50 plus grams. So the gold is still there, it's just narrower. And of course, 50 grams over ½ meter is definitely a significant grade for that width. In the coming weeks, we'll be talking more about the drill results here. All I can say to this point is that those opens have been taken off the slide because we've now added drill holes and they've just been moved farther out in either direction, to the east and west and down. But we still have not found the edges of the system. Another perspective to look at is the depth potential of the Golden Mile, and that's what I use this slide for. There's that last graphic sitting up here. There's the 800-meter portion of the central Golden Mile superimposed on a long section through the Red Lake district. And you can see that this deposit, Red Lake, was mined down to a depth of over 2.5 kilometers, quite extensive. This is actually, though, rather typical for this type of gold deposit, that the continuity down depth is quite significant. Kirkland Lake, Timmins, Val-d'Or all have mines that were mined at this type of depth. And in fact, the Beardmore-Geraldton area, there were over 4 mines that were taken down to depths in excess of 1,500 meters. So it's very typical. You can see, however, that our drill program thus far is still testing just what would be the upper portion of the system. And we have a lot more work to do to get the drill holes down to the deeper part of the system. Essentially, it's telling us that there's a lot more potential at depth that remains to be explored. This is a look of the Golden Mile. Now we've kind of swung around and we're looking back at the vein the other direction, the opposite direction of what we did before. In the process of doing the deeper drilling, we of course have to step off in this direction. The vein dips to the southeast, so we're stepping out here and drilling back across the vein. One fortunate aspect of that is those drill holes then cut a lot of material that's in the hanging wall above the main Golden Mile. And as we mentioned in a recent press release, we've hit other structures, parallel veins, out in this area, one of which has visible gold within it.